detail that you actually want to CAD out yourself and save those details and use them later on. We're going to go over all of those different options today. Before I go any further, I just want to discuss how the webinar works. So I will be giving my formal presentation about creating a detail. Then after I'm done with the webinar details, I'll open up the GoToWebinar panel on the right-hand side of your screen. There's a question section there, and you can type in any questions that you might have, whether it's as we go along or whether it's after the webinar is completed, and I will do my very best to answer those questions live online. Also, after the webinar, I will be sending out an email. In that email will be a username and a password that you can view our webinar archive. Also attached in that email will be a PDF file that you can take and look at all of the different things that we go over today in a PDF format, and you'll be able to check that file out on your own time. So let's go ahead and get started here. What I've got on my screen is just a simple little house that's been created, 4 walls. It's got a floor system. I've inserted a basement, as well as a stair and a railing showing an opening as well. If I just quickly jump into 3D view here, we can see from the overhead view, like I said, just a simple box. We've got our opening with our stairs and a railing showing, and we can see down below into the foundation. First thing I want to do today is we want to start creating our details, so we're going to actually cut a section. In order to get any of the details, derive any of the details from the objects that we've drawn, we need to cut that section so that we can insert that wall section or that cross section into our drawing and use the elements as they are to create the detail that we're looking for. To do that, I'm going to click on the Create a Section button. Create a Section can be found down here. Looks like the little cross-hatched house down at the bottom of your screen. If we use the drop-down arrow there, we can see, since we don't have any sections created, we don't have the option to go to a specific section, but we can create a brand new section. So when I click on Create a New Section, what we want to do, this is going to be a 3-click process, define our cut line, and then define the direction and the depth of our section. In the software, bottom left-hand corner of the screen, whenever you enter a command, we've got a prompt section on the screen. So down here we can see pick first point of section. That is prompting us what this command is wanting for the next step to create our section. So what I'm going to do is create a section through the stairway here. We're going to cut through the stairs. We're going to be able to see the framing around the stair, see the railing. That's where I want to create my cut line. First off, I'm going to go through the entire building. So out to the left-hand side of the building is where I'm going to left-click first. Now you can see as I drag through the building, I'm creating my cut line. So where am I cutting this cross-section? Second point, or second click, pick second point of section is what the prompt is telling me. I'm going to come out to the outside of the right-hand side of the building and left-click again. Now as I drag my cursor, it wants us to choose the third pick. Pick direction and view depth is what our prompt is telling us. So first, if I drag my cursor up in this case, it's going to view and create the direction looking up towards the what we'll call the back of the house. If I move my cursor down, the section moves and will look down to the front of the house. Also, I'm creating a box here as well that is going to allow me to create the depth of the section. So how far into the building are we looking? In this case, if I just left and cut my section here, it would look partially through the building. It wouldn't see anything at that back wall. So if I had a window on that wall or whatever the case may be on that wall, it wouldn't actually show that in my section. If I wanted to show that, I want to make sure that the depth of my section includes that wall. I'm going to go to the outside of my building again and left-click that third time, and that will generate my section for me. So what we've got here is just a quick model representation of our section view. We can see our footing, our slab, our foundation walls, our main floor walls, railing, everything we can see, and we can see what kind of detail that's giving us as we cut through that section. So like I said, this is just a very simplified version of the section. We'll get into how we can detail this section even further as well. So what I'm going to do is we're going to jump right directly to our details page. So our working drawings, our worksheets, our CAD detailing that we can do, we're going to do that directly in Worksheet. And I'm going to start off number 3 worksheet. So we can see here we've got our title block set up. We're ready to start inserting our different views, in this case details. And to do that, what I'm going to do is insert Smart Views. So to insert Smart Views, I'm going to come up to this button up here, the Define Smart View button. And I can also find that in my drop-down menu if I go to Insert, Smart Views, and we've got an option here to Define Smart View. What that does, brings up all of the different views that my model is going to be able to create for me. We can see across the top here the different tabs: 2D view, 3D view, 3D quick view, elevation views, and the very last one here is the section views. So I click on the section tool. We can see that section that I generated automatically comes up for me. We can also see here, if I drop down the section menu, if I had more than one section created or cut, it would show all of those different sections in the drop-down menu that I could choose which one I want to actually insert in this case. The other thing we've got here is the scale. So we've got the ability to set our scale, what we want this detail at. The first detail I'm going to create is a footing detail, and we're going to do it a little bit larger than our 1/4 inch equals a foot. We're going to go to a 1/2 inch equals a foot for our scale, just so it's a little bit bigger. We can see more of the detail as we're in nice and tight onto a footing. Then we've got the option to include datum lines. In this case, since I'm creating a detail, I'm not going to include any datum lines at all. And the insertion option, image or drawing. An image is going to import this as a pixelated image or a raster image. In this case, we actually want to insert this as a drawing. Each of those lines we want to be represented as lines. That's going to allow us to go in and actually edit those lines when we insert this drawing. And then lastly, what we see in this insert view is what's actually going to insert. So we can use that to our advantage. If I just scroll up here and use my zoom window and zoom in nice and tight to the footing here, if we wanted to insert just a footing detail, we could zoom into that detail, and again, what we see is what's actually going to insert. It would just simply be this foundation wall, the slab, and the footings that would show in my detail. So use the zoom tool, zoom window, to zoom in nice and tight to just that detailed area. The other thing we can do is the display mode. We've got different display mode options that we can use to define and perhaps show a hatch pattern. So if we go into our pattern mode, we can see that the concrete items here have this concrete hatch pattern to them, and we can insert this view with those hatch patterns directly in it. So now that I've got my smart view to the view that I want, I'm pulling these details from the actual model that I've drawn. All my settings are set correctly. I'm going to change the scale. I'm inserting a section. I'm zoomed into exactly where I want to be. I've got the pattern mode set, and I'm going to insert it as a drawing. I can go ahead and click the Insert button. Now, the details attached to my cursor, I can come in and place it down wherever I want. Simply left-click will drop that detail down onto the page. I can use my zoom window, and again, I'm going to click and drag a box and zoom in nice and tight to the detail. So we can see how this detail inserted. We can see the footings with a dashed line. We can see the wall, and we can see the slab. And then there's a couple extra lines here that actually outline the rest of the box that we'd inserted. If I click on this detail or this smart view that we've inserted, we can see that it is one solid block. When I click on a single line, all of the lines of that detail are selected. It's because they're all part of one single block. You can see I've got a solid blue grip here that I can click and drag on the grip and move the detail to a different spot in the page if I want. I've got the triangle here, which is my rotate, that I can take and rotate this detail if I wanted as well. The other thing that I want to point out that's important to this detail here is the object properties. So when I select on this detail, I'm just going to deselect for a second. We can see object properties, we have no selection. As soon as I select on one of the lines of the detail, it selects that block, and now we've got all of the different properties of that block. So we can see here we've got the layer. What layer is this block inserted on? Regarding the block itself, this block has its own name right now, section 1. So when we inserted the Smart View, we actually had the option to change and give the block its own specific name. The other one is the definition of the block. So if we wanted to come in and edit the details of this block, maybe delete some of the lines out, add in some different hatch patterns, add in different lines or different details, we could take and edit the block definition, and that would allow us to go in and edit each and every single line within that block as well. The Smart View, so when it comes to the actual Smart View that we inserted, that section view, I've got the ability to update the contents. So if I make a change in model, maybe in my model I change the footing size, or I change the depth of the wall, or the thickness of the floor, whatever that change may be, if it gets made in model, I can come back to this detail, select on that Smart View that was inserted, and click the Update button, and that will update any changes that were created in my model. So if I did, in fact, change that footing size, I could come in, click on the Smart View that was inserted, click Update, and my footing would automatically change based on what was proposed in the model view. Also with the Smart View, we've got the ability to redefine the settings of the Smart View. So when we're in the Define Smart View dialog, that's where we chose which section we were using. That's where we chose the scale. That's where we chose our the hatch pattern or the pattern view. All those different details of the defining of the block itself. Rather than deleting this out, if I wanted to change those details and reinserting a brand new Smart View, I can just go in and redefine the settings and make a change to whichever settings that I wanted to change. So that's what the Redefine button will do. So next, what I want to do is actually come in and edit this block. I want to add some more details to this footing block that I've created here. To do that, like I said, I'm going to click on Edit Definition. We can see now that we've got a dash box around our detail. We can also see that if I select directly on a line, that I'm just only selecting that line that I've selected on, rather than before when it selected the entire block. Now I've got individual lines that I can take and select. So now that I've got the ability to edit individual lines, you can see if I click on a line, again, it's got its own object properties because it's a selected item. We can see what layer it's on. We can see what color it's got, line type and line weight. And each of these settings can be individually set for this line. So if I wanted a different line weight on this line, or if I wanted a different line type to make it dashed or a dash dot, whatever the case may be, I can change that over here in the object properties. In this case, what I want to do is actually delete this line. So we've got a couple different options. Under the Modify tab, we've got the garbage can here, which is the delete option. I could simply click that. Under the Modify menu, same idea. We've got the delete option. Or we've also got available now right-click menus in Worksheet that I could take and right-click and choose delete as well. Or the last method, just simply select the item, and when it comes to deleting, I can hit delete directly on my keyboard, and that will delete that line as well. Now this line to the right here, a couple of different options. I could delete it as well. I could take and use a grip and actually click and drag on one of the grips and extend it down. Maybe I just want it to end off the floor slab. And there I've just simply extended that line. So different options that we can do and take to this detail. Other things we can do is we can actually add lines or draw more detail here. Under the Draw Tool tab, we've got the ability to add in lines, circles, arcs, rectangles, hatch patterns. I can use a polygon hatch or a boundary hatch to create different hatched areas. And then we've also got a detail section here where I can insert different details. One of the options being a cut line. So if I want to come in here and show a cut line that this foundation wall actually continues on, but I don't want to show that detail, I'm going to insert a cut line here. So I'm going to click on 2 points where my cut line is, and then the third point that I select is just how big my little marker gets. And if I zoom in a little bit, I might be able to get it a little bit better. And there I can specify how big that cut line is represented. Circle, I can come in if I wanted to draw in a drain pipe, for example. Come in here, I can take and draw the circle. Click that in, and now I've got a separate circle in there that I'm adding details to this detail. Solid blue grip on this object as well, that I can take and move it. I've also got options under Modify Again. I've got the Move command, or right-click. I've also got the ability to move if I want to take the bottom of this drain pipe and match it to the bottom of my footing. I can take and do that. So I can add in that detail. So we can make items a part of this detail or a part of this block. Now to get out of editing this block, I'm going to hit the Escape key on my keyboard. When I hit Escape, we can see that the dashed box disappears. And now when I select on my Smart View, it selects everything all as one item or one block again. In this case, since I added in the lines, I edited the lines, added in my cut line, added in the circle. When I was editing my block, that's where I did those detailing. So that became a part of my block. I've also got the option to essentially draw on top of this block too. If I wanted to add more detail but not necessarily make it a part of the block, I could add them here as well. So if I come into Tools, for example, I've got the option to add in text with a leader. So if I wanted to call out the footing, let's just simply call it, I'll do this in capitals, concrete footing, and click OK. Since this is a text of the leader, it first wants me to insert the leader, pick in first insertion point of the leader. So I left click to put that in. We can see that I've got Ortho turned off, so I can draw an angled line. If we wanted to draw this straight up, I could temporarily hold down the Shift key, and that will temporarily enable Ortho for me. Or I could press F8 or click on Ortho and also make that an orthogonal line. In this case, I'm just going to draw a diagonal line, and then the second part of the leader, I'm actually going to do straight. So in this case, I will hold down my Shift key, temporarily turn on Ortho, and left click a third time to tell it where I want to end that leader. So 3 clicks, first click being the start of the arrow, second click being the hinge point or the point where my second tail of my leader starts, and then the third point where I want to start my text and end my leader. So we've added on a leader now. The other thing we can do is add in dimensions if we want as well. I'm going to choose the linear dimension tool. So up here on the menu, this icon here is the linear dimension. Also under Tools, Dimensions, got the option for a linear dimension as well. Linear dimension is going to be clicks to define what you actually want to dimension. So if I want to dimension the floor slab thickness, for example, left click on the first part of it, left click on the second part where I want to dimension. I'm going to drag that dimension all the way out here, and we can see that that dimension gets placed down. Now the dimension is showing 8 inches. This is actually a 4-inch concrete slab. If you remember from last week's webinar, or just to explain further what's going on there, is our global scale, or the scale that our drawing is set up to, is a 1/4 inch scale. We inserted this detail at a 1/2 inch equals a foot, which means essentially it is twice the size as our global sheet scale. So what we need to do is actually select on this dimension, and we can see, just like everything else, whether it's a line or the block itself, the dimension has its own object properties. We can see the object properties see this as an actual dimension. We can change the scale. We can change the actual size of it. The value scale, which in this case we actually do want to change. We essentially want to take the value that's coming up at 8 inches and multiply it by a factor of 0.5 so that we get the proper dimension, because the half-inch scale is twice the size of our quarter-inch scale. We need to take our dimensions and factor them by 0.5. We can also change our dimension style. We can use the override to type in whatever text we actually want to show there. So we get typed in 4 inches in the override and have the same effect. And we've also got the option to reset the text position if we want as well. So that's how we can change and add in leaders, add in dimensions, and make this detail whatever we want. Like I said, we could add in more lines, more leaders, whatever we want to make this detail a detail that we're going to be using over and over again in all our future projects. So for the sake of that, let's just pretend that we've got the detail here that we want to create. It's got all of the detail that we'd ever want to add here. It's pointing out the drain pipe, it's pointing out the floor slab, all our hatch patterns are in here. Everything about this detail is perfect. Now I want to be able to use this detail over and over again on future projects, or even on different pages within this project. What I'm going to do is create this entire detail as its own block. That way that block can be inserted on different pages on this sheet, or inserted into different files and have the block be reused on different files. To do that, I'm going to come up to the Insert menu here. We've got an option here for blocks, and what I want to do is define a block. So that brings up my Define Block dialog box here. First off, it's looking for a block name. Okay, so this detail that we're going to create into a block, what do we want to call it? Well, let's just simply call it footing detail. Okay, so we've given it a name. A couple of other things that we can do here is pick a base point. So if I come in here, pick an insertion base point, click on this little button here. What this does is when we insert this onto different pages, or we go to insert this block wherever we're going to insert it, this picking a point that we're doing right now is what your cursor is going to attach to when you go to insert it. So in this case, I'm just going to come down to the bottom left-hand corner of my footing and left-click that and use that as my base point. So we can see here, now we've got a base point defined. The other thing we need to do is select our objects that are going to create this block. Right now we've got 0 objects selected. So what I want to do is come to drawing and actually select the objects. Click on that. The first object I'm going to select is the Smart View, or the original block that was inserted. So we can see when I left-click on that, that is selected to go in and be a part of my block. I'm going to hold down the Shift key on my keyboard and then click on the text of the leader that we inserted. Continue holding down Shift and click on the dimension that we included. Now I've got all of the different parts of this detail that I want to include. Once I've got that, I can right-click, choose Enter, and that will create the detail based on those 3 objects I just selected, or however many objects you would need or that would make up your block. Then we can see we've got 3 different options. We can retain what's already here, just leave it as 3 separate objects, and it's still going to create a block. Second option is convert to block, so it's going to take the original object, the original 3 objects, that we just selected, and convert them directly to a block right away. Or we can take and delete those 3 objects, and it's still going to create a block. We would just have to insert that block to have it a part of this page if we want. So that's what those 3 different options are there. I'm just going to leave it on retain and click OK, and now we've got a block created. We can see since I chose retain, the 3 objects are 3 separate objects, But if I come up here to Insert Blocks and Insert Block, in the drop-down menu here, we can see we've got the block called footing detail. I can take and insert that. Click OK. We can see how my cursor is attached to the bottom left-hand corner of the footing, just like I had told it, and left-click to place it in. And now, if I click on that, that is one entire block. We can see the block name, footing detail. And from here, I can even edit this block further if I wanted to by editing the block definition. Okay, so that's how we can create a block. That block can be inserted into this drawing. I can go to a different sheet and insert it, do whatever I need to do with that block. Another option that I've got is to, if I come up to Insert Blocks, I've got an option here to insert block from file. So this block that we created, this footing detail, that block has become a part of this file, this details.bld file. This block is a part of it. If I want to add this block onto a different project, I would need to insert block from file, come locate this details file, and that will give me a list of all of the blocks that are included in this details file that I can insert it into that future file that I might work on. So that's how that's going to work. A block, when it gets created, gets saved to the project that you are in. Another option that we've got, if we want to save the block directly and just be able to insert that block all the time without having to track down or remembering what file it's a part of, the other option I've got is to export a 2D drawing or create it as a DWG file. So if I click on the detail, the block that we inserted, I'm just going to simply delete it off. I'm also going to take the title block and delete it off as well. If I use my zoom to fit, basically all we've got as a part of this drawing is the detail that I want to export. So I don't want any other detail on here. I don't want 4 or 5 different details. I don't want my title block. I just simply want the lines and the objects that are going to create the detail that I'm going to create. Once I've got that, I can then go to File, Export, and I've got an option here to export as a 2D drawing. If I come in here, Export, brings me to my desktop in this case. Obviously, you can save this wherever you want. If I drop down the menu here, we can see we've got 2 different export options, DWG or DXF. So I can take and save this as footingdetail.dwg, and this would be available as a DWG file that I could take and import it into different drawings using, which I'll show you in a second, the import CAD file option. So what that's doing is essentially in a separate CAD file, we created this little detail as its own CAD file. I don't have to remember which file it was created in to insert it as a block. To insert a CAD file, just simply come up to the Insert menu. We can see we've got a PDF file, CAD file, or image option. Obviously, in this case, we want to import CAD file. And if I wanted to import my footing detail, I could go to my desktop, track it down, and bring it into my view here. In this case, I'm going to insert a different detail. We can see here that as part of the install of Envisioneer, there are a bunch of details that are created and there for you to be able to insert. So we've got different title blocks, we've got different drafting symbols, and we've got different details. So as an option here, I can take and import a separate detail. So you can see all of the different details that we've got here. Roof truss, window head sill jamb, ridge beam, floor connections, lots of different details. In this case, I'm just going to grab a CMU foundation footing drawing. Go ahead and open that up. It brings up my insert dialog here, or my import dialog. So we can see the detail here. We can see that it's set up for 1/2 inch equals a foot scale. So over here in my scale, I'm going to type in 2. I want to make it twice the size since I bring it into a 1/4 inch environment. If there's multiple details on one sheet, I could take and set a crop box around this. So lots of different options that I can do with this detail. So this detail can be any DWG file, whether it's one of the details that we provide to you, whether it's something you find online or something that you're given by an architect or another designer or wherever you might get your DWG. This is how you would insert it into your drawing. Once you've got it ready, just a matter of go ahead and clicking Insert, and we can drop that down as part of our drawing as well. If I click on that detail, again, we can see that it is its own individual block, but just like other blocks, we've got the option to go in and edit the definition. So if I take and click Edit Definition, we can see the dashed line around it. It means I'm editing this definition. And again, each individual line, each piece of text, I can come in and edit as I need to. So if I wanted to add in that this was an 8-inch CMU foundation wall, I could take and add that detail, and it puts that detail in there. Any of these lines, hatch patterns, detailing, any of this, like I said, is its own separate entity that can be edited. We can see down at the bottom here that the text is sticking out. I could simply take this line and click and drag and move it out if I wanted to. I can use my nudge, which is my arrow keys, and just click an arrow key to move it. Then I've got different commands that I can use here. I've got extend commands, trim commands, fillet commands, chamfer commands, different CAD commands that I can use. Real nice handy one here is the fillet command, where I want to take and join this line and this line. So it'll automatically join those lines up. Again, use the fillet command, left click on the first line I want to join, left click on the second line I want to join, and it will join up the two lines that you select. So again, this detail was inserted as a DWG, but we do have the ability to come in and edit it and make it work for whatever our needs may be. Press Escape to get out of editing that detail, and again, we can see that now that block is its own separate block. Next thing I want to do is go back and define a smart view again. And this time I'm going to go back to the section view. And what I want to do is take a snapshot of the details right here in this area. So we can see we get the floor framing, we got our stairs, we've got just a general outline of our wall. What I want to do to show more detail there is come into the view filter. We can see all of these different things that are turned on and off. We can see the eyeball for the floors is partially on, the roofs is turned completely off, tags and marks is off, and walls, some items are on, some items are turned off. We can see if we click on the plus beside walls that the trim and surfaces are on, but the wall framing is turned off. If I simply click on the wall framing eyeball, I can turn on the wall framing. I can turn on the roofs as well. You can also see some of these items are locked, such as the roof framing. If I wanted to show my roof framing, I could take and click the eyeball and turn that on. And we can see how we can use our view filter to turn elements on and off. Elements on terrain, I'm going to come in and turn elements on terrain off, turn off the terrain line, so that I've just got a nice view of my wall detail here. So now we can see the bottom plate, we can see the sill plate, we can see that this wall is defined a little bit more than just two simple lines. Again, what we see in this view is what's going to insert. The scale, again, I'm going to change the scale to a 1/2-inch scale, no datum lines, and when I insert it, I want to make sure it's a drawing so that I can edit those lines as required. Go ahead and insert, and I can add this detail in wherever I wish. And again, we can see all of the different parts of it. We can see again that it is one single block, and if we want, we can take and update that block or edit the block definition. A couple of things I do want to show if I zoom in nice and tight to the wall here. Actually, in the zoom previous, I'm going to do show the entire wall. And under our Draw tab, again, I just want to go over some of the detailing options that we've got as we're drawing this. Start off with bad insulation. So what I can do is we've got a bad insulation tool. I can take and define with 3 clicks. First click being where the starts, second click being the height that we want the insulation, and third click being the depth or the width that we want to show the insulation. And that will automatically draw that on there for us. Another option we've got is the wood section. So we saw the cut line, we've seen the bad insulation, we've also got the wood section option, where I can take and define the height of a member and define a width, and it will show me the cross that is showing me that I'm cutting through a wood member in this case. So again, doesn't matter whether you do width or height first, just define it with 3 clicks, and we can draw in our different masonry details, our different wood section cut details. And then lastly, what we can do is we can add in the brick. We can see here that we've got a masonry section option that I can add in here. Or another way I want to show you is the option for a polygon hatch. So we can click here and define a box by a polygon and include a hatch pattern within that box. So we got the option to include a boundary line. So when I create a box, do I want to include the line around the outside? And then the pattern, what pattern do I want to use and do I want to include it? So if I go into select here, if I take my 45-degree brick cross-hatching and use that, go ahead and click OK. And then I want to define the outline. So I'm going to click 4 different to define the outline of where my brick hatch is. Use my snap track. Bring that straight down. Right-click Finish. I don't need to go back to the original point. And there I've created the brick crosshatch to show where my masonry section might be. So all the different little things that we can add in for details. Again, we can add in dimensions. We can add in text with leaders, hatch patterns, different things to create the detail that we're looking for. And then lastly, the last thing I want to go through is how we can create and define our own detail. So we've got all of these tools here, like I was showing you before, lines, arcs, circles, ellipses, polygons, rectangles. We can take and use these tools to create the actual detail that we're looking for. So if I wanted to recreate a footing detail again, if I zoom in here, I can left click using the line command here, and I can come in. We've got our distance and direction that I can use. If I turn on Ortho, if I wanted to create a 2-foot footing, I could type in my 2 feet, maybe 8 inches tall, and I'm coming around and just starting to define exactly where I want my footing. Come in here, I can draw my wall, right-click Finish. If I select that line I just drew and right-click, we can see we've got some different options here. Offset being one of the options. If I want to offset, make this an 8-inch wall, I can type in my offset distance. Looking at the prompt, it's asking me what side I want my offset to, and I can define which side and start to create the different details here as well. Add in hatch patterns. My boundary hatch I can use. Select boundaries. Select this little boundary here and use a concrete 2 hatch. Go ahead and insert that, and there we are. We can start to hatch that and detail out by hand. We don't necessarily have to pull from our Smart View, but we can take and draw and CAD out whatever details we want as well. So that's all about creating a detail. Obviously, you can see lots of different ways that we can do that. We can take detail areas from our Smart Views. We can pull in different CAD files, whether it's CAD files we generate ourselves or whether it's something we find online or get from somebody else. We can add in different detailing, like our rigid insulation, hatch patterns, masonry cuts, wood section cuts, and we can draw in our own lines, dimensions, leaders, and CAD out our own details if we wish as well. From there, we can take and actually save blocks. So we can pull blocks from other files to reuse over and over again, or we can create our own CAD files from the details that we create as well to use those over and over again in our future projects. So with that, that's what I wanted to cover today about creating a detail. So I will open up the questions section in the GoToWebinar panel. If you've got any questions about detailing or drawing or anything to do with creating details, feel free to type those in, and I'll do my best to answer those live right now. Okay, so a question here, can the detail be saved in the Envisioneer catalog to the right? To answer that one, first off, no, we can't take and generate a line detail or generate a 3D object and then just add that to our catalog. If we want to add elements to our catalog within the model space, if I just jump to model here into 2D, if we wanted to add items to our catalog, we would actually have to create them with a third-party program such as SketchUp or 3D Max. Create them as 3D objects and create the 2D lines that would come in. That way, if we were to cut a section through them or if we were to detail those objects, they would come in because it's seeing that 3D geometry that's created. But not really any way to create a detail and then make it a part of the catalog. There is an option if we create a polyline or create a line in our worksheet here that we can save it to our library manager as a profile. If we wanted to create like a trim profile or a member profile, something like that, we do have the option to do that within the program and save it to the library manager, but no way to create an element. Can the other CAD details be brought into the catalog as well for quicker viewing? And again, unfortunately, it can't be brought into the catalog. If we go up to Insert CAD File, which is on the Insert menu as well, Import CAD File, these details, the only way to see them, unfortunately, would be within Windows Explorer. If you had a DWG program that was able to open them, you could actually see your preview in your Windows Explorer. But other than that, there is no quick way to view them without bringing them in and kind of seeing what kind of detail you've got. Okay, so hopefully that clears up those questions. And that seems to be the only two questions that I see right now, so I'll leave the panel open for another minute here. Feel free to type in questions you might have. That's the great thing about the webinars is the ability to have your questions answered right live online. While I'm waiting, I will just mention again that after the webinar, I will be sending out an email. Included in that email will be a username and password so that you can check out the webinar archive and review these webinars. They do get recorded, do eventually get put up to the website, and you can review them all on your own time as well. Also included in that email will be a booklet, a PDF file that you can also take and check out on your own time and go through some of the exercises that we've covered today. Okay, so I don't see any other questions there. Hopefully everyone has a better understanding of what details can do for you, what saving blocks, how that can save time for you, saving DWG files, and helping you draw, and like I said, saving time in the future. So with that, thanks everyone for joining me, and I hope to see you next Tuesday for our 2 o'clock webinar. Thanks everyone. Enjoy the rest of the day.